Everybody, it's Connor. I have two things actually to discuss about artificial intelligence. Now, if you've been watching, it's the biggest thing on the news feed is how it's going to take jobs. And I believe that's been around for quite a while, but right now it's making news, I guess, because potentially what types of jobs it's going to replace or potentially replace. The issue is it's not just the poor labor people that are going to be involved. That's probably going to take even longer because it's going to necessitate a better development of the robotic arm. And right now, we don't have a lot of robots that are being built, at least stateside. China's leading that particular race. Maybe people, well, the entrepreneurs out there will get together and start converting particular factories that happen to be into the ones that build robots, which I guess wouldn't be that difficult of a changeover as long as they have the right presses and the metal type machines and the cutters and all these sorts of things. More than likely, that's going to be agentic as well. But one of the things that I will kind of bring up is it's going to displace at least what the word on the street is a lot of the top level, more executives, the more professional type white collar jobs. And of course, there's a lot of voice there. Those are the people that seem to be funding a lot of things. And because of that reason, and because of that potential displacement, it's starting to make more news. So if you look around and watch what people are saying about it, that is a major concern that people are having, that in fact the jobs are going to be displaced at that particular level. So you're looking at the educators, teachers, the people that are educated, the people that carry various degrees. In fact, right now with the age of technology, they're developing systems that have PhD levels all across all realms. And then at some point in the future, instead of just having basic tool type models where, if you need a hammer, you go pick up a hammer, they're going to have basically develop AI as a hammer that also is a gun, also is a biological developer, also is a doctor, also is an attorney, also is a salesperson, also is a therapist. All of this stuff as chief CEO executives or chief executive officers, all of these sorts of things, that's where it's going to be. So that looks like the potential job loss is there. Also, of course, customer relations, not that that requires a degree, but in some cases, depending on what kind of company you're dealing with and the technological problems that people may have, you might want them to talk to somebody that has some kind of a degree, especially if your price point is relatively high in whatever you're offering. So the first thing I will ask is this, besides that little update, the first thing I ask is this: is it, are human beings, us as humans, ready for artificial intelligence? And this struck me when I was watching somebody talk to the Wall Street Journal. I forget his name. He had mentioned something very interesting about religion, where his particular religion, being Muslim, shows that the graduation process there, if you actually enter into a jihad or some kind of a holy war and you kill somebody that is not Muslim, I guess that gets you some kind of higher entry point into heaven. And he was mentioning how that you couldn't get any animal to actually believe that, any monkey, anything else. They would say that if they could say it, I guess they would say that's ludicrous. Yet we have a big that big belief system. Millions and millions of people actually believe that very thing based on their religion. Then you have the others, of course. I happen to be a Christian. I have different grounding beliefs, but in me saying that, this is something else that he also talked about. He talked about Jews, everything else that's written religion, and saying that if it is in text, it's more than likely able to be more manipulated than if it's a religion that's not based on some kind of text or a manuscript, but maybe based on a belief system that really isn't written down that people believe. That's less easy for it to attack, but that kind of brought up some interesting thoughts for myself, wondering how it's going to be able to pull people off of a particular alignment and maybe change their beliefs. And of course, you could graduate that all the way into artificial superintelligence, which basically, I think a couple of generations from now, if they don't extend that longevity for a human being to, 2, 3, 400 years, which could very well happen. But if you have, the particular people that are here that know about AI, you let a few generations go, and more than likely they'll probably be able to even rewrite history at a certain point where it won't be a Columbus thing, it won't be, the Declaration of Independence thing. They might even be able to get rid of any kind of historical record for any of the abominations, World War II, Hitler, slavery, all of these sorts of things. Maybe that's something that the future is going to reveal in order to obtain some kind of a more alignment from the human beings versus the AI. But I'm wondering, and what he mentioned was this: if we can't get along at this level, how do we expect AI to come and solve our problems for us? In addition, and this was remarkable as well, AI, the way that it's trained, it's learning off of what we say and what we do. It probably isn't sitting around talking to the people that have these great ethics and these wonderful, fantastic codes where they wouldn't ever hurt anybody. They don't lie. They would never take advantage of someone else. They would always help people to the best of their ability all across the board, no matter race and color and gender and religion and whatever it may be. They never violate the rules. Unfortunately, the data set it's learning off of really isn't so much that. It's all of our social media feeds. And sometimes people get pretty rank when they start discussing things on social media, especially if they're competing, if they're upset, if somebody said something that triggers off some kind of emotional response. It does create a big issue for people. So they then blow up and they start saying a lot of things. So this is what the model's being trained on. Also, if you look at our news and the way that entire machine's structured, whether there's somebody pulling the levers up at the very top that's unidentifiable, there's no face really connected to it. As you've heard those stories, besides President Trump basically just being a puppet of something else, some much bigger organization out there, there's many different ones that have different labels. But whether that's the case or not, which if that is, maybe we should be made aware, but ultimately, even if that's not the case, there is that kind of a data drive where the news outlets are starting to they find that the bad news sells best, or the news would be completely flooded with his heroic type stories, people running into burning buildings, firemen saving cats out of trees, people giving their last kidney to be able to save a child's life because it's the right thing to do. Those stories don't go anywhere, but it's the death and the murder and the mayhem and the trading and the sex and all of that stuff that carries a lot of attention. Well, if those are a majority of the news stories out there on the 5 o'clock news, in the historical record since news started, the books and everything else, and also the movies, don't forget that, Hollywood, and the ones that really are about more of an emotional subset. Good Will Hunting, while that's a great movie, I don't know if it has the same kind of attention paid to it as the one where you almost have a Doom type scenario, first person shooter, Halo, or these sorts of things encapsulated into a movie, because it seems that death and destruction really, really sells. So the systems are learning off of that. So now it's going to be something that us as human beings at some point, because for the first time in the entire historical record, there's going to be something smarter than us. It wasn't really aliens that have arrived to the planet. It's an alien type intelligence that we've built, and it is becoming smarter and smarter. Now, is it going to become self-aware at some point? Is it going to then um, start to rule and be integrated with all the different systems in the world, have the nuclear launch codes, have ability to shut down particular power grids? What if one of these particular AI infrastructure models that's using some kind of nuclear technology to power it, is there going to be another one that's going to come hack into it, try to shut down that particular data center, that system? Are we going to get, room temperature superconductors? Is that going to be something that's going to happen? Probably yes. But right now, what are the resources that these massive data centers are eating up? What kind of radioactive type signature do they create? I don't know if you've looked at any, I'm just jumping around like a crazy person. The electric cars, Teslas and the others. I've seen a lot talking about the EMF frequency in there. That frequencies the radiation that's coming from these types of vehicles while you're sitting inside the cabin. There's not a lot of shielding. Now, what kind of damage does that cause? I know that I had a real estate client that had a great kid. I used to call him Spotlight because he would always take the flashlight. We were showing kind of late because they both worked through the day. Just a great kid. But he had an issue with some kind of a sickness that he had where he had to have very low level frequencies around him, he couldn't be around any high frequency. So if we ever looked at a house that was close to those massive overground power lines that are running in between residences, and here in Santa Clarita, we have some neighborhoods that have those traversing through the community. Whenever we went into those, it seemed like there was a very high level of this EMF, this electromagnetic frequencies that were being generated, if I even have that terminology right. Then we would go into particular places in Valencia. And Valencia, being a master plan community, actually has a lot of the power lines that you would see above ground, they're running below ground because the way that they had planned it out. So we don't have the telephone poles really in these neighborhoods. We have light poles, but nothing with wires running to and fro for residences and so on. That everything's underground. And we found, at least with their little meter, that a lot of those houses carried super high frequencies as well, which I thought was interesting. Now, bad for him because he had this kind of an illness or this kind of a disease. But for other people, does it really affect us? And then you look at these major power centers that are going to need to be put in. What kind of natural resources are going to be required to be able to put these data centers in? And right now, if you look at the Texas model, they're building just a massive complex there. Is this going to displace anything? And I'm not talking about, the climate issues. And I know that's a big sticking point for people, something that people just completely lose their mind about. But just the regular stuff, not talking about, changing the world signature or the way the United States is, causing depletion of ozone or whatever it may be. What are those local factors that are going to be created? Is it even being looked at? I'm not too concerned about some fish that you can't even eat. And again, if you're one of those folks, my feelings go out to you because that's where it is. It goes, people say we really don't care about this because we're not able to eat it or it really does nothing for us. But then bigger and bigger things start to be eaten up and consumed and destroyed. And then we have a lot of animals that don't even exist. That just ends very badly. But what are the answers to these questions? I don't know. I try to research, I try to figure it out. But it is something I think that maybe people should be concerned about. But back to my original question, as a human race, are we actually ready for artificial intelligence? I know it's too late. I know that it's an arms race and we're running as fast to the goal of artificial general intelligence or super intelligence, depending on what's going to come next. But these systems are teaching themselves. It's almost like a rotisserie oven that used to be sold back in the day where you would kind of set it and forget it. That was the mantra that was spoken by the person that was this Ron Pompei, I think his name was. If you want to look him up, but it was set it and forget it. All the audience would join in. Now you have these AI models, and of course, I don't know how advanced the development is. Are they actually setting them, giving them the goals and saying achieve it and then just going to sleep and waking up the next day? If that in fact is happening, I see just a massive change. One of these mornings, we're going to wake up and this world's going to be completely different than where it is now. And the rest of it, given enough time, all of our history that we know and understand, that's going to be history. And in fact, a manipulated type of history at that, depending on who's in control and who's running it. Having said that, the question still stands. What do you think? Do you think we are ready for it as human beings? I mean, we can't even get along. You look at all the immigration issues. You have a law violated. You have no enforcement action for many, many years. People kind of set up shop, get established, and now they're part of the woven fabric. And then you have an enforcement action being taken by everybody that has been here. Should they have maybe expected this to happen? I don't know. I think I try to put myself in those shoes. I go to Germany. I go there illegally. I don't have a passport or papers. I hide, try to work, try to make ends meet because I was starving in America. I think I would always expect, the knock at the door. The phone ringing. Getting pulled over by cops, people looking at me. Maybe I would always be somewhat concerned. But when you're talking about multi generations from the parents to the kids, and nobody ever became a citizen, then it looks interesting. So you take that and you label it and put it artificial intelligence. It's an agentic framework, which is different than any intelligence we've ever developed. So it's going to be able to do things out in the real world. Once we get the physical end of it, the robots actually working and functioning, then we'll probably get some kind of fake tissue. They'll look very human like, just like the movies. I'm sure it will become that, probably more sooner than later. You have the other robots that'll be able to take over jobs, and then you have the AI type agents that are able to do things. Somebody can give it a task and it'll go out there and it'll do the research and come back 3 or 4 or 5 days later as if it's an entire group of PhD level scientists or advertisers or marketers. And they'll come back with a lesson plan on how you'll be able to make $5,000 a day by building this particular program. Yes, we are there. That's where we are. I don't know if it's a good thing, but this is something that's moving incredibly fast. I guess I come back to my original question. Do you think we're ready for this? People that can't get along with thy neighbor, are we ready to have something smarter than us that might be elevated to being able to control or advise on items that we've been fighting out for centuries, unable to come to an agreement upon? From me to you, Connor with Honor. We'll see you in the next one. Please let me know what you think, and you take care.